Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's Thursday with AARP Wisconsin. I am Amber Miller, your hostess, and also with the AARP Wisconsin team. So before we get to our special guest today, just as a friendly reminder to check out the AARP Wisconsin website for any upcoming virtual events, anything to do with vaccines, all that good information on advocacy too. So please check out the website below, which is aarp.org/WI. As always, please remember the Friendly Voice Initiative, which was launched last year. It is free. It is open to any age, and you do not need to be an AARP member to register for this. If you're looking to just speak to a friendly voice on the other end, this is the perfect program for you. And you could put a request in at the website below or the phone number, and you could do this on behalf of yourself or a loved one. Even though we are coming, hopefully, out of a pandemic, we are still looking for some great volunteers to join the AARP Wisconsin team. If you're interested in volunteering with us or getting additional information about openings with our volunteers, you can go below to aarp.org and then /I want to volunteer. We have openings with our outreach team, with our advocacy, fraud watch, but we'd love for you to be part of the AARP family. So as we might know, June is Pride Month. And if you joined us last year around this time, we had Bo Bellinger, who is actually our guest today. But as we know, Pride Month is a full 30 days dedicated to celebrating the LGBTQ identity, equality, and the ongoing fight for queer rights. As our founder, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus said, what we do for all. And we proudly carry this guiding principle forward in our work with the LGBTQ audience. So we have Bo Ballinger here. Once again, he joined us last year with the AARP Office of Community Engagement to talk about what Pride Month is and also the resources and information available for our LGBTQ plus community. Hello, Bo.
Hey, Amber, thanks for having me again. And I know that LGBTQ is kind of a mouthful, isn't it?
That's okay. I try to enunciate it, but yes, and hopefully I said all the letters.
You got it.
Thank you. And Bo, I know you're joining us from Colorado, but it's always really great to have you on the show. So people may not know that AARP has nearly 1.2 million members who identify as LGBTQ+. So that makes us actually one of the largest membership organizations representing LGBTQ individuals in the world. So can you tell us a little bit about how AARP engages with this audience?
Yes, I would be happy to. And thanks again for having me on today's show. And you're right, more than 1 million of our 38 million members identify as LGBTQ. And I think that's actually a pretty staggering number. And we know that LGBTQ people come from all walks of life, all ages, all races, all ethnicities, all gender identities. And as you said, Amber, our commitment to the LGBTQ community really stems from our founder, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, who did say, what we do for all. So that's really how we approach our work, whether it be our policy work at the local, state, or national levels. We show up as a fierce defender if we're fighting for the rights of LGBTQ workers, advocating for Social Security survivor benefits, or speaking out against things like housing discrimination. But we also like to have some fun with all that purpose. So each year, AARP participates in hundreds of events across the country focused on the LGBTQ community. And this year, of course, a lot of those events continue to be virtual, and our state offices like you all in Wisconsin host lots of different things like caregiving workshops, movie screenings, concerts, and of course we often sponsor different Pride festivals as well. And you can find some of those events in your area, virtual events that you can join from anywhere on our virtual community center. The link is there on the screen, aarp.org/VCC. And since we're in Pride Month, I also wanted to just take a quick moment to tell folks a little bit more about how Pride came to be. So 2 years ago, we got to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. And for those who aren't familiar, the Stonewall Inn was a bar in New York City that was frequented by LGBTQ patrons who were constantly being harassed by authorities because at the time, it was actually illegal to serve alcohol to anyone known to be LGBTQ. So, in fact, there were no legal protections for LGBTQ individuals in this country, and there was no ability for them to be open and authentic in any kind of public way without fear of being imprisoned, uh, being a victim of violence, or sadly, even death. So, on June 28th, 1969, the patrons of the Stonewall Inn, many of whom were actually trans women of color, which is a part of the story that doesn't often get told, finally stood up for themselves and fought back against the kind of constant raids on the Stonewall Inn. And it resulted in several days of protests and actually became the birth of the modern day Pride movement that we celebrate today. So today, communities all around the world celebrate Pride in June for that reason, to honor the movement that began at the Stonewall Inn in New York City.
Wow, great. Thank you so much, Bo, for that background, because I don't know if everybody knew why we celebrated Pride Month. And, I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I know our Pride Festival now has been canceled 2 years in a row, but I love that our virtual community center still gives people the opportunity to still show support to our LGBT community. So definitely look into that website. There's a lot of stuff going on, especially this month. So, Bo, I understand that AARP has partnered with the national nonprofit StoryCorps over the past 3 years to help tell the stories of older LGBTQ adults. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the program and maybe even share a few stories with us?
Yes, I would love to, because it's really one of my favorite projects that I get to work on here at AARP. And we actually started working with StoryCorps a few years ago to help celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. So, for those who don't know, StoryCorps is a national nonprofit organization that records conversations and shares them on public radio and online with the goal of building connections between people. And we've been collaborating with StoryCorps for 3 years now to amplify the voices of the LGBTQ community. There is so much power in storytelling, and I think it's really important that we as an organization are working to raise the visibility of older LGBTQ adults and their experiences, because frankly, at the end of the day, storytelling helps us be resilient, it helps us build empathy, and it also allows us to realize our commonalities rather than focusing on our differences. So, for those who tuned into last year's Pride episode of Thursdays with Wisconsin, you might remember hearing the story called Life Worth Living. Today, I'd like to share a few more stories with you, and then hopefully take a moment to reflect on those. So, first up is David Wilson, who came to StoryCorps to reflect on his path to becoming a plaintiff in a landmark case that opened the door for marriage equality in Massachusetts. So let's take a listen to David Wilson's video.
EMTs arrived within minutes, and they called the police because they saw me standing in the driveway, an African-American man in a white neighborhood. And when the police arrived, they wanted to arrest me for assault and battery and breaking and entering. And when I got to the hospital, I found out that they were not going to give me any information because I had no relationship to Ron. As far as they were concerned, I was a stranger. They called Ron's family in Vermont and said, "Can you give permission for us to talk to David?" And his 75-year-old mom said, "Of course, they're partners." So they came out and they said that he was dead on arrival. My whole world just kind of fell apart and I felt pretty broken. Where do I go from here? So I joined a support group. One meeting in walked a man. That man's name was Rob Compton. 3 years later, we had a commitment ceremony. Lots of people came and they thought it was our wedding. And we said, no, this isn't a wedding because we don't have the right to get married. So it was amazing to become a plaintiff in a major lawsuit against the state of Massachusetts. Part of the decision to be part of the case was to talk with my family. My dad wasn't sure. All of a sudden, his only son is going to become this prominent, out, gay, black man. So I talked with Dad about some of the issues. A couple hours later, Dad said, "You're doing the right thing." May 17th, 2004 was the first weddings. Dad said, "Well, you're going to City Hall and you're going to be part of all of this excitement. What about me?" I said, "Dad, I'm sending a limo to pick you up." My dad had never been in a limo. He got a new suit, came down, and limo took him down, and he was in the front row, and when we walked down the aisle, both his arms were in the air. He was 89 at that point. And he didn't see it just for gay people. He saw it for, all people that had been discriminated against. And his whole life he had been discriminated against. So I think for Dad, it was just a victory that he could be a part of. He could not have been more proud. It was a great day.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful. And I don't know if a lot of people have heard of StoryCorps, and if this is the first time that they're seeing a video, I think it's very powerful, and definitely looking into the organization. But what are your thoughts, Bo, on when you watch that video?
Yeah, I really love this video, and actually, as I've seen it many times, and as I was watching it this time, it's, you can hear the emotion in his voice when he talks about his dad. And I'm trying not to have the same emotion in my voice, because it does make me think of people like David Wilson, helped open doors for people like me, who was able to get married in July of 2017 out here in Colorado to my husband, who grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. And I grew up in a small town in Wyoming, and my parents were there and his parents were there to walk us both down the aisle, which was really, really cool. So I love this story so much.
And I know, because we're talking about how powerful it is, and I encourage people, once again, I know we're going to play a couple more videos to check out StoryCorps, but, but what does AARP, how does AARP support the advocacy issues related to the LGBTQ equality? I think that's really important, especially since we're talking about AARP supporting, the LGBT community.
Yeah, so while we've come a long way since the Stonewall Uprising, there's still a lot of work, unfortunately, that needs to be done to kind of work toward full equality. And I'm proud to announce that AARP just last week issued a letter of support for the Equality Act, which is a federal act designed to provide equal treatment under the law for individuals by prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity in a lot of different areas like employment, housing, public accommodations, public education, federal funding, credit, the jury system. So again, we've come a long way, but there's still work that needs to be done. And I'd actually love to ask if there are folks who feel comfortable doing so, who are listening to this or watching this right now, if you would take a moment to just reflect on this question yourself about what does equality mean to you? And is there any pivotal moment in your own life that led you to advocate for LGBTQ rights? So just think about that a little bit yourselves, and anyone who feels comfortable doing so, there's no pressure, but you can feel free to share any reflections in the comment section. Again, no pressure, but I think it's just important that we ask ourselves those questions about what does equality really mean to me? So while you're doing that, thinking about that, I think we can go ahead and queue up our next story, if that's okay. So this story is about Stefan Lynch, who was raised by gay parents in the early 1980s, and he was cared for and loved by a group of adults who were largely gay men, whom he called his aunties. Stefan remembers the succession of AIDS-related illnesses in his family, including the death of his father in 1991. But even in the face of terrible sickness and loss, his aunties showed him how to survive and care for one another. So let's go ahead and queue up the My Aunties video and hear from Stefan.
My family were mostly gay guys who were my babysitters and the guys who, took the pictures at my birthday parties. And I felt like I had this amazing family. I called them my aunties. And it was a really wonderful, amazing world that came crashing down. Starting in '82, the first person I knew died of AIDS. A young guy named Steve.
And how old were you at the time?
I was 10 when he was diagnosed. I remember I was on the beach at Fire Island, and I saw him, and he was covered in these purple spots. And I remember asking my dad, like, what's wrong with Steve? And my dad said, oh, he has this skin cancer called Kaposi's sarcoma. And I said, well, what is that? And my dad said, well, nobody really knows, but there's some gay men that are getting it. And within, I think, 2 months, Steve was dead. And it was pretty much a succession of deaths of my family throughout the next decade. My stepdad, Bill, died in '87. My dad died in '91 after a really grueling 6 months of me taking care of him. I was 19 and was on a break from college and exhausted from taking care of my dad. And I called up my Auntie Eddie. I said, can you help? And within, I don't know, a week, he'd organized 40 people to do round-the-clock shifts. He was the only other person in the room with me and my mom when my dad died. At that point, everyone had died except for a handful of stragglers who I now hold near and dear to my heart, my aunties. It was a powerful family. There was a lot of love. And they modeled for me how to survive an epidemic even if you were dying while doing it.
Wow, that's such another, powerful story and just well done. And it feels very extra relevant given the experiences we've all recently had with the COVID-19 pandemic. So, Bo, does AARP help support the LGBTQ family caregivers? Because I feel like we need to, touch on that a little bit.
Yes, and I agree. This is a tough story to listen to, and it's hard to imagine that much loss throughout your life. But I think it's really an important story that demonstrates the power of a community when they show up to support one another. And, through our research, we know that about 75%, 3 out of 4 LGBTQ older adults are concerned about having adequate family and social support as they age. They worry about how they might be treated if they need to live in a long-term care or assisted living facility. And some folks who've been out and open their entire lives end up going back in the closet if and when they need those healthcare services because they're afraid of how they might be treated. And as we just heard in the story, when it comes to caregiving, it is important to remember that for many older adults in the LGBTQ community, this is the second time around that they're becoming caregivers. So many of them at a much younger age were forced into caregiving roles throughout the AIDS epidemic with very little support or resources. So there's some trauma associated with that as they're aging and becoming caregivers again for partners and loved ones. But the good news is that AARP has some great resources to help people prepare and equip to develop caregiving plans for their friends and their family. And one of those things is the LGBTQ Prepare to Care Guide. It's free on our website. The link is there on the screen. And it really provides a number of useful tips for becoming a family caregiver. So this is specific to LGBTQ audiences, but there's also a lot of different Prepare to Care guides on that site for people from all different backgrounds. So I encourage folks to check that out. And actually, let's see if folks want to take another moment for reflection, and if we do have anyone on this call, on this video, who has been a caregiver or is a caregiver or received care, which the reality is it's going to be almost all of us by the end of our lives. How has that experience shaped your outlook upon life? So again, think about that, reflect on that, and again, if you feel comfortable, if you are a caregiver or have experience with caregiving and want to share anything in the comments, no pressure, but please feel comfortable to do so. And I think—
And Bo, actually, I'm sorry, before we get to the next video, there is more of a question, I think, from one of our viewers, Angela. What can AARP do as an organization to combat prejudice against the LGBTQ community?
That's a great question. And I think part of it has to do with us visibly showing our support for the community. AARP is a very large organization, 38 million members across this country. And, we represent the 50 plus demographic of the country. And there's a lot of variety within those 38 million members. And I mentioned before, we have just over 1 million of them identify as LGBTQ. So I think it's really important that we as an organization continue to take a stance on things like the Federal Equality Act and a lot of those local and state policy issues that we support to help sort of break down the systemic issues around equality for LGBTQ adults. But I also think it's really important that we are very visible in our support of the community through things like our AARP, the magazine, our programming. We work with a lot of different local partner organizations who really are more adept and more skilled and more experts at working with older LGBTQ adults in their communities, like SAGE, which stands for Services and Advocacy for LGBTQ Elders. A lot of our state offices partner with their local SAGE affiliates to host programming and just basically show up to be a support for the community. And I think a lot of it is down to that visibility piece and making sure that people realize that we stand with the LGBTQ community.
Great. Thank you so much, Bo. And thank you, Angela, for your question. So, Bo,
Yeah.
I'll pass it back over to you to kind of frame out the next video.
Okay, great. So this story is called The Door She Opened, and this video tells the story of Dee Westenhauser, who sat down with her friend Martha Gonzalez to remember the one person who made her feel comfortable in her own skin. So let's go ahead and cue up The Door She Opened.
If you were to see Aunt Yaya back in the day the way I saw her, she was tall. She had a beautiful angular face with high cheekbones, and she had brown eyes. They almost looked like owl eyes, scanning everything. And the way she walked around her room would tell you she held herself in high regard. One weekend, my mom and my dad, they decided that I was going to go to Aunt Yaya's house. I was 9 years old. And once the door closed, she says, "How would you like to change into something that's really comfortable for you?" And what was there were a blouse and a wig. I knew I was a girl. And so that weekend, I got to be me. We went shopping in my outfits. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Yaya, and she would introduce me as her niece.
Would you go home and mention anything like that?
No. She said, when you go home, you have to be what they want. Because if you don't, and they find you out, you will be hurt. She was the one who taught me early on that I have to play the game. Yaya, she had a lifelong friend. And it wasn't until years later that I finally figured out that her friend was her lover and her partner. And you never spoke of that back in the day. Yaya never got the love she was supposed to from the rest of the family. And Yaya wanted me to be everything that she wanted to be if she could live her life over again. She gave me pearls of wisdom. You could string a necklace to the moon and back with everything that she would share. I loved her. She loved me back. And behind that white door became my place to be the little girl that I needed to be.
That was great too. These stories are just amazing, and about feeling seen and kind of like finding your identity, which is similar to the other videos we've seen, but this one I think just kind of hits home a little differently. And she made some really brave choices to get where she is today. Bo, any reflections on this story?
Yeah, I think we're all really striving to be truly seen and heard by a friend or loved one. And I think that feeling when we are seen, it gives us hope. So for me personally, my grandmother was someone who really helped me find myself. And I unfortunately wasn't strong enough to come out to her before she passed away, but I'm so grateful that she and my parents just consistently demonstrated their love and support for me throughout my life. And Amber, not to put you on the spot, but I don't know if there's anyone in your life or really any of our viewers who,
Yeah.
if you can think of someone that has had an impact on your life that you'd like to share about.
Yeah, I would say it would have to be kind of a group of people. I think I'm very lucky and blessed to have such a great group of friends who respect me and I don't know, who just kind of take me for what I am, which, we all kind of have those moments of, moodiness and, not knowing where to go in life, and just sitting down with, my friends, one of my friends I've had since I was 5, so over 35 years, and just appreciate my family. I'm sorry, my friends are my family, and
I
they
love
know
it.
that. So I definitely, appreciate everything they've done.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
And, if anyone's watching and feels like they want to honor someone from their life, feel free to put it in the comments. And I know we're getting a little short on time. Do we have time for one final story?
Oh,
Okay.
yes, please.
Okay,
Please.
great. So the final story today comes from Joseph Patton. And I like this story. I think this is an important one for people to hear. When Joseph was 81 years old, he sat down with StoryCorps producer Judd Esty Kendall to explain how he joined the U.S. Navy in 1956 and was given an undesirable discharge because of the assumption that he was gay. So let's take a listen to the Joseph Patton story.
We were in San Diego and we went to a gay bar. I was exploring my sexuality, but they had military police walking around to check and see if there were any servicemen in any of these gay bars. You could not be gay in the service at that time. There was a group of us that hung out together. We drank together, we played cards, we became friends. But when these two guys told the commanders they were lovers, everybody that were close friends with those guys was arrested, and I was kicked out of the service for being friends with the homosexual. They gave me an undesirable discharge. That was the worst time of my life. To be in the service for my country is the greatest thing I thought I did. I was a perfect sailor. I did my job very well. So that whole period is almost like a dream. A lot of it I didn't want to think about because it hurt so much. And I was so ashamed. But, I can't live in the past. I gotta be right here, right now. Minute to minute sometimes, hour to hour. I have to remind myself that I'm loved by me and others and by God. Love has no limits in my life. And love surprises me all the time. Right now, I see it outside because the sun is shining. It's been gray all day. I'm 81 years old, but sometimes I get up and dance. I shake my ass with life. Yes. And I'm blessed that I can feel like that.
So I want to thank so much Joseph for his military service, and I also want to put a little asterisk that I love him. I love his spirit. So Bo, you talked a little bit about dancing and kind of feeling blessed to be alive, and I know sometimes it's hard to see, but I think it's such a great message for us to remember, especially after what has been a very difficult year and a half for many of us. But I just love his spirit.
Yeah, I agree. There was his little curse word in there, which hopefully didn't offend anyone, but it's his voice. which is the beauty of this program. And I'm always amazed by the resiliency of the LGBTQ folks, especially the older LGBTQ folks who share their stories with StoryCorps. I'm so glad we've had the opportunity to partner with StoryCorps to amplify these videos. And, you know, if any of you want to share what brings you joy, feel free to put that in the comments. For me, it's getting out in the mountains, spending time with my family, or going to one of those Wisconsin lake cabins, which I'll be doing in a couple of weeks. But I do also want to let folks know that if there are any veterans who happen to be listening to this or watching this, first of all, thank you for your service and your sacrifice. Second of all, AARP has a wealth of resources for veterans, military, and family audiences. You can go to that link there on the screen and find out a lot more about that. And you know, Joseph talked about dancing and feeling blessed to be alive. So I think this is my kind of final comments, is a nice chance for me to plug one of those fun AARP sponsored activities I talked about earlier. And that is the Daybreaker, which is the global morning dance movement. It's called Daybreaker Live, Saturday Morning Fever, a disco dance. So we're sponsoring this to help celebrate Pride. The event is next Saturday, June 26th. It's from 10 to noon Central Time. You can enjoy music, kick up your heels to Sister Sledge, Indigo Girls, and Mike Q. It's a free event, so you can go to aarp.org/pride, click the Saturday Morning Fever link, and you can register to join that dance party.
Well, Bo, I want to thank you so much. And I know, you know, we had you on last year around this time, but we support the LGBT community year round, not just during Pride Month. And I think you did an amazing job to highlight all the goodness that AARP is doing for the LGBTQ community. But I really love the short videos, and we will make sure to put those in the notes for the video, just in case these might be videos that you want to share with your friends or family. So, Bo, as always, even a year later, this was an amazing conversation with you, and I just really appreciate all that you do for AARP and just bringing this information and resources to our viewers. So thank you again for being with us this year.
Thank you, Amber. It's great to reconnect, and happy Pride to you and everyone who's watching.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bo. We appreciate it. And for next week's show for Thursday with AARP Wisconsin, we're coming up June 24th. So it's all about Friends of Wisconsin State Park. So if you're interested in learning more about this organization, their efforts and initiatives, please join us back here on Facebook.com or our YouTube page next Thursday, June 24th at noon. Of course, we always love to plug some upcoming events. Bo did the dance one that's coming up on June 23rd, Healthy Lifestyle Series, 6 Pillars of Brain Health, our Home Fit workshop. So if you're interested in learning just a little bit more about maybe free or low cost ways you can modify your home to stay in it longer. Movies for grown-ups, I Want My MTV, which already sounds intriguing. And June 29th, when we go to the Tentons, an audio drama. So if you're interested, it's similar to a podcast, but you can listen to it in the comfort of your own home. So if you're interested, you could go to the Wisconsin AARP website or call the phone number below. Small dollar, big impact. The next application will be due July 21st. If you know of an organization that has a really cool idea that's innovative and creative, they could apply for up to a $1,000 grant. There's more information at aarp.org/WISDBI. And as always, we appreciate you coming to the show this week. And please celebrate Pride Month. Once again, it doesn't have to be a month. We celebrate it every day. But please forward those videos to your friends and family. They're short, but very meaningful. So thank you, as always, for joining us this week. And I look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Until then, be safe.